If you are sensitive to suicide, rape, sexual assault, minors being sexually assaulted, anything like that, I would strongly suggest you to watch with viewer discretion, and if that is too triggering for you, find a different video. Hello everyone. I should have came in with a lot more energy, but let me tell you, I made this concoction last night. Oh God. I made Carly one too. We both have it right now. I got my Beetlejuice cup and she's got the Busch Gardens cup. What I did is I got a cup. I put ice.
I got a cup. Step one.
And I put ice in it, and then I put chocolate syrup around the edges, and then I poured like the coffee in it, and then I started drinking it. I drank 2 last night, and I had my second one at like 9 p.m. and I went walking through the living room, and my mom was like, "You're not drinking another one of those, are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "Oh my God." And I was like, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. Like I was telling everybody, like, I will be fine, I can handle my caffeine. I didn't go to bed till 4 a.m.
And then I walked in and she started making one for me, and her mom goes, "Oh, you're not making her drink one of those, are you?"
The horror on her face. She's like, "Oh my God, you are not." I in fact did, and I probably shouldn't be drinking one because I have to go to bed early because I gotta get up early to go to Missouri. But today I wanted to talk to you about this cult, not a cult, a cult, but it's the FLDS church. And last year I watched a documentary about it, and I was like, I want to do this, and then Tyler did what he did, and so I didn't do it. But now I have Carly here, so we're doing it. You look like a frog.
I am.
I watched the documentary about it last year. What is my hair doing? It's starting to piss me off.
It's okay, mine has like this little
mullet.
I had an undercut and now it's growing out. No, it's fine. Oh no.
And Carly's gonna try to not just stare soullessly into the camera this time. The FLDS, I literally didn't know existed. That's what I wanted to say. Carly watches Sister Wives, and every time she starts talking about Sister Wives, I think of the FLDS, even though like it's not the same thing, but like it's kind of the same thing. But she'll just rant about Sister Wives. I've never seen an episode in my life. I don't really.
Never seen an episode.
I don't really like care to watch it. That reality TV is not my cup of tea. So she'll just go on rants about it and be like, I know you don't watch this, but blah blah blah. And then I'm just sitting here like thinking about the FLDS, and I'm like, the time has come. So the FLDS is the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's a religious sect of the fundamentalist Mormon denominations whose members practice polygamy.
I am so proud of you that you got that whole first line out
Right.
in one try. I was like,
no, I was trying really hard. And so oh my God.
Here we go.
Polygamy is the practice of marrying multiple people. Okay, so that would be like if I married Jordan and Carly. I'm not going to. Neither of them.
Fine.
That's a very important part, because in 1890, the leaders of mainstream Mormonism got rid of the practice of polygamy in a deal with the federal government to gain statehood for Utah. So that's when things started to just kind of hit the fan. It was the LDS, and then a lot of people didn't agree with the fact that they were getting rid of polygamy because they think that polygamy is a very, what's the word? It's a very important part of their religion, and the fact that they were taking it away to gain statehood, they were like, we're not having this. This is not what we're doing. This is not what the religion says. Like, they thought that they were completely breaking the religion, and people started panicking. The members who said, there were quite a few members who were like, I'm not gonna do this. I'm not going to do what you want. I'm going to continue to practice polygamy. And then the LDS was like, well, you're excommunicated, then you can't be doing this because we want statehood, and polygamy is illegal in Utah. I'm pretty sure it's illegal in every state, isn't it? Okay, yeah. I'm not very smart with states.
Well, maybe it's not, because like it's not you can't legally marry more than one person.
Yeah.
But So, like, even on Sister Wives, he's got 4 wives, but he's only legally married to one of them because he can't legally marry more than one. So I feel like some states just see it as you have a wife and 3 girlfriends instead of, like, seeing it as polygamy.
So it's legal in a lot of other not states, but countries, but it's illegal everywhere in America. But yeah, so you just can't officially get married. After that happened, a lot of splinter groups started popping up, which is where members that were excommunicated were like, well, we're just gonna form our own new group. Like,
if I look at you, I laugh. If I stare at the camera, I look like an idiot. I don't know where to look.
Thus, the FLDS was created. And the origins of the FLDS are traced back to around the 1950s, but like, it's not for sure. And it started in the Short Creek, Arizona area. It's still based there, like the headquarters of it is what they called it, but it has expanded into Hilldale, Utah, and Colorado City, Arizona. And the reason they picked that is because the area was super secluded past the state lines, so when the raids happened, they weren't going to get caught, because if they got caught, you know, illegally marrying multiple people, they were going to go to jail. And then the members ranged from 6,000 to 10,000, and it's considered a polygamist cult. And one thing I found interesting is that the group has been designated as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center is an American nonprofit legal advocacy organization specializing in civil rights and public interest litigation. And they said the group was racist and homophobic. One of the leaders, he said, and I quote, "The black race is the people through which the devil has always been able to bring evil unto the earth." That sounds pretty racist. And he said it was a victory day for the devil in 1978 when the LDS, which is the original Mormon church who doesn't practice polygamy, decided to let blacks become priests. I mean, good for them, but the FLDS just was not having that. And watching the documentary, I did see that there was like not one other person that wasn't white. And I didn't realize that until after I watched it. When I looked over at Jordan, I was like, there's only white people there. Like, I don't know how I didn't realize it.
Ghost stories are always scarier when they're told by the very people who experienced them. Hi, I'm Becky.
And I'm Diana.
And we're the hosts of the Homespun Haints podcast.
We talk to people just like you who have come face to face with ghosts, demons, haints, and other strange paranormal phenomena. All of it makes for a chilling good time.
So grab yourself a sweet tea, turn off the lights, and listen to some eerie, true ghost stories on Homespun Haints, wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm not scared. Are you?
After the LDS Church got rid of plural marriages, John Y. Barlow led the Mormon fundamentalists who were dedicated to preserving plural marriages. Barlow was the first prophet. A prophet is a man who's believed to have been called by God to lead, and that's what they called the leaders of the FLDS. He led the community of Short Creek until he died on December 29th, 1949, and the next leader was Jordan White Musser? He was the leader during a government crackdown on polygamy.
Which is what I was talking about earlier. Basically, they raided the place and a bunch of people got arrested. Like, all of the top people that were involved that were marrying multiple people, they all got arrested and went to jail.
It was known as the Short Creek Raid of 1953, and all FLDS members of the church were arrested along with 236 children.
That's a lot of kids.
Musser appointed Rulon Aldred to be his successor. He wasn't accepted by the Short Creek community. This led to a schism and many followers ended up breaking off and joining Aldred. The split became known as the Apostolic United Brethren. The Short Creek group appointed Charles Zitting as their leader. Zitting died in 1954, and the next leader that was chosen was Leroy S. Johnson. He led the church until he died in 1986. Rulon Jeffs became the next prophet. Rulon was a prophet until he died in September of 2002, and his son Warren Jeffs became the prophet after. He is the current prophet today.
Do you want to see more of this? Straw.
Right in the eye.
Or this. But on my Sims.
No.
But not this.
You're not gonna get naked. It is not an OnlyFans.
I would love to see you over at Patreon. We have a Patreon account that the link is in the description. You can go to it and subscribe and see all of this bonus content, Q&As, lives, bonus pictures, bonus footage, blooper reels, death.
My back.
All of that and more. So if you want to get to know us on more of a personal level, I don't know why you would, because we're kind of chaotic, but starting at $3 a month, you can come and support us. The support helps us with things like buying new equipment, going out and making more content for you guys. So the support is very much appreciated, and I thank all of you who have or are going to subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you over there.
Yeah.
Brought to you by viewers like you. Thank you.
Okay, the marriages, they went by the doctrine of plural marriages.
Which is something they don't really have anymore, but the FLDS still goes by it just because that's part of their religion.
It states that a man having multiple wives is ordained of and a commandment by God. Having multiple wives is required for a man to be able to receive the highest form of salvation. There is also a belief from the patriarchal doctrine saying that wives are required to be subordinate to their husbands. Placement in marriage. A young woman of an age able to be married is assigned to a husband by revelation from God to a leader of the church, a prophet. The prophet also elects to take wives from men and gives wives to men. Law of placing. Rulon Jeffs had 22 wives and had more than 60 children. Warren Jeffs had over 79 wives.
So what they really believed in was that if you didn't have more than 3 wives, well, if you didn't have 3 or more, you weren't getting into heaven. And that was pretty much what every male grew up to believe. Like, they really drilled it into your head that if you grew up and you only had 2 wives, you couldn't get into heaven. And so that scared them into marrying as many people as possible. And, you know, when you're in a closed community and there's only so many people, so you know what that's gonna lead to. Sweet home Alabama. Pretty much the only thing that they taught women was that you comply and you serve your husband. During the documentary, they asked one male, they were like, so where did women go when they died? And they never taught that. The guy was like, you know, I don't know what happens to them because they never told us. They were just so focused on men having more than 3 wives so they could get into heaven and be there in God's eyes. And the prophet was selected by God, basically. Like, God came to that person and said, you are now the prophet. I speak through you. And so, like, Rulon, women would go to Rulon and say, I'm ready to be married at the age of, 18, which was the legal age that you could get married. And he would go to sleep, and God would come to him and tell him who that woman was supposed to marry, and then he would come back and say, you were to marry this person. So then they would marry them. And the prophet was always, the one responsible for the marriages.
But that would be such a weird way to live. Like,
yeah.
Go to bed one night and be like, tomorrow I'll have a husband, don't know who it'll be. Well, not tomorrow I'll have a husband, but it'll be picked.
Yeah, like picked by God picked by the prophet through God or something. I don't know. I think I said that backwards. So the history of Warren Jeffs. Warren is the son of Rulon, and he plays a very important part to all of this just becoming so chaotic and completely destroying everything. He was born more than 2 months premature, so The fact that he survived back then was a pretty big deal. His family said that he was a very special person, and he was super close to Rulon. Like, it was almost scary, obsessive with how close they were. It was even to a point that when Rulon died, Rulon would not let any of his brothers get near the casket. Because of this, Rulon had decided that Warren was going to become the next prophet, like, said and done. People were kinda put off by that because he was always quite odd. He was the oddball out, but his parents absolutely adored him. He could do nothing wrong in their eyes, like that kind of person. We all know someone like that.
Never turns out well.
When Rulon did die, Warren decided that he was going to marry all of his dad's wives. That's not right. That wasn't normal from what they did then. And 2 of the wives said, I'm not marrying you. That's not how this works. And he basically told them, he was like, you can either marry me or you can get out. And one said to hell with this and left, never came back. And he told all of Rulon's wives that were now his wives, you women will live as if father is still alive and in the next room. That's just creepy. In January 2004, Warren expelled 20 men from the Short Creek community, including the mayor and some of his own siblings. He reassigned their wives and children to other men in the community. He didn't have a good reason for expelling them, but it was the smartest men and the ones he thought couldn't be brainwashed by the things he was about to do. That's a warning sign right there. When you're getting rid of your own family, and he got rid of like the doctors, the firefighters, like the important people in the community that actually went out and had an education and knew that things were about to get bad and that they would be the ones to protest against it. So the fact that he got rid of these 20 men, basically what happened, they were sitting in the meeting room and he listed all of their names and said, you have defied God, you are no longer welcome here. And those men were standing up and everybody was staring at them, and he said, if like everybody else doesn't agree, you are also defying God. And so he told everybody to raise a hand if they agree with his choice. And those people were already so brainwashed that they all raised their hands. So these men had to leave their wives, leave their children. They had to leave right then and there. They had to go home and pack up, could not say goodbye to their families, and they had to be gone. And then some of them never saw their family again. And that is shitty. Like, just imagine that. And one guy that they interviewed, they said that he hasn't seen his family since the day that he left because they're still in there. That just baffles me.
It just shows how, like, manipulative he was, like how easy it was for him.
He taught that in order to get into heaven, a man has to have 3 or more wives or he isn't worthy. Now, before he came into the picture, it was more lenient. Like, a lot of people only had 2 wives and it was fine. Like, there was one couple, he had 2 wives, and one was the upstairs wife and one was the downstairs wife, and they had a bunch of kids together and everything like that, and everything was fine because that was allowed back then. But he really started cracking down on this, being like, every man has to have 3 or more wives or you're not getting into heaven, really putting the fear into everybody. So then the rules before Warren, you know, it seemed super normal, just like a religious community. Women generally didn't have short hair, but they could do their hair any way they wanted. Like, they could curl or straighten their hair, you know, they could show their personality. They didn't wear makeup, no skirts above the knee, like normal things that community did. It was kind of like a rule that you didn't cut your hair. The women planned to use their hair to wash Christ's feet during the second coming, also because they will wash their husband's feet in heaven, so they need long hair.
It was like a suggestion that they don't cut their hair because it would have a purpose.
Men wore plain clothes, usually long-sleeved collared shirts and full-length trousers, and nobody could have tattoos or piercings. That one's pretty much a given.
Yeah.
The children did attend public school. It wasn't wrong for them to go out and have friends that weren't the same religion.
It seems so weird to me that they like let the kids like leave the community.
They lived in a part where they did experience like other people who weren't the same religion as them, and everyone just kind of like left them alone, like weren't really hating on them. They weren't doing anything wrong, so it wasn't It wasn't as worrying as to what was to come. And then the rules under Warren, when everything really started cracking down, is when shit hit the fan. When Rulon died, things started to get more strict and seem more cult-like, and obviously he was manipulating and brainwashing very, very slowly. Braided hairstyles only. There were 6 types of braided hairstyles that you could choose from, and you had to learn like all of these different, very elaborate braids that, you know, I probably couldn't even do. And you had to do that every single morning, or else you'd probably get punished in some way, I don't know how. No denim, and one day he decided that the color red was no longer allowed. They can't wear red because they believe it's Jesus' favorite color, and when he returns he will be wearing red, so no one else can wear the same color as him. That doesn't make sense.
He was just like was like, yep, Jesus' favorite color is red. So, like, what?
And he really started drilling into women's heads that you are to do 2 things: obey and have babies. It started getting to the point where, you know, there weren't enough people that you weren't distantly related to, so they started marrying their first cousins, and that's
not a good idea.
No, and it obviously started causing like some deformities, like not like King Tut deformities, because like brother and sister, it wasn't like that, but it was more like
so the genes are a little more spread out in first cousins, but
it still caused like mental deformities going on. It was just weird. He banned most forms of entertainment. No dogs, no toys, no TV, no internet, no newspapers, no celebrations, including Christmas and birthdays, no festivals, no parades, no camping, and no fishing. What the hell do you do then? Children were taken out of public school and they were homeschooled. Now that was probably his smartest move.
See, that makes sense to me, because when you said that they were going to public school, and then when he took over, like, I could see that he would be like, I don't want them out, like, telling people what goes on.
And because he had them so brainwashed, he had all of them believing that he was president of the United States, because they didn't know. And when he started homeschooling them, they brought in textbooks and they would tear out pages of like health pages and science pages and things that he didn't want them to know about, like that he just cut it off from them completely. And that was probably the smartest thing he did. He also told them that God led Neil Armstrong away from the moon during the Apollo 11 flight, and that America never actually landed on the moon. I don't know what he had against the moon.
I know somebody that doesn't believe that whatever. Everybody got their own conspiracies. It's fine.
Married couples are forbidden from touching each other and having sex in certain cases. There was strict control over which men were allowed to father the FLDS children. At the end of your life, the prophet has to give approval if you're able to get into heaven. And that, I don't understand that, because he shouldn't be the one giving approval. It should be God giving approval, like when you go to your judgment day and everything like that. So that one just, you know.
Yeah, and if you were following all the rules, and then still have to, like, at the end of your life be like, I guess you get to tell me.
Yeah, like, that just doesn't seem right. God wouldn't want somebody telling you that, you know. At the age of 14, boys were forced into construction and had to operate heavy machinery. Can you imagine your son operating heavy machinery at 14 years old?
He'd probably hurt a lot of people. And himself.
And it violated child labor laws. They ended up getting fined quite a bit of money. And then girls under 18 weren't allowed to have jobs anymore or cell phones, so they took those away. Before, the girls could have jobs and they could, you know, be independent, and he was just taking their independence away because, you know, comply and have babies. That's all he wanted from them. And no bikes or trampolines. Trampolines are a safety hazard.
Well, they are, but...
Story time! One time when we were like we were 14 or 15, Carly, we were standing on my trampoline, and I was only like 90 something pounds. I mean, I still am only like 90 something pounds, but this massive gust of wind comes, and Carly's like standing there talking to me, and then the next thing she sees is like my feet going over the edge.
Yeah, like I wasn't paying attention, and I'm just standing there. I weigh much more than 90 pounds, so I didn't even know there was a gust of wind. Like, I felt it, but it didn't knock me off balance. And I'm standing there talking, and I'm just like, blah, 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 and I look up and I just see her feet, like, falling. She just flipped right back off the trampoline, and I was like, what happened?
And essentially they were just cut off from the rest of the world. Like, it was only them in that community, so no one comes in, no one goes out. If you go out, you better never come back.
Like our parents did when we were kids. If you're going out, you're staying out.
Some members decided that it was way too much change and left, and some were too scared to speak out or defy the prophet.
Because yeah, at that point when you've been so brainwashed, I'm sure it would be a hard decision, like, what if he really is, you know. Because of plural marriages, things like bride shortages started happening, and incest and child abuse. There was something called the Law of Sarah. FLDS women who aren't married perform sex acts to each other to be ready for marriage with a man.
And that kind of struck me off, because if he was homophobic, why would he allow that, you know? Like, if he was so against, like, same-sex marriages and stuff, why would he allow that?
Because he's a freaking creeper, probably. Yeah, he's a creeper. Warren would participate and spectate when the women were performing sex acts on each other. Creeper. He was suspected of trafficking underage female children across state lines and the Canadian border. Warren would marry underage girls to older men by going to motels across state lines to Utah. There was no legal documentation to prove that the marriage happened, which, like, people that are in plural marriage now, it's the same thing. You can only legally marry one wife. So everybody that's, like, still today in polygamy, they have one legal wife and the rest aren't. Teenage boys would get excommunicated for dating or listening to banned music like rock. But the real reason was because there wasn't enough women for each man to have more than 3 wives. More than 400 teenage boys were left homeless with nowhere to go and were kicked out as young as 15 years old. Wouldn't put anything past this guy at this point.
Yeah, like, he was messed up. Like, imagine him having his own kid, and at 15 years old telling this kid, like, oh, hey, there's not enough males now to marry all of these women, so you gotta go. And just being told to pack up, and only growing up in this gated community now, not knowing where to go. And so the homeless shelter started seeing a mass increase of underage males, and they were like, what is going on? And that's when things kind of started being like, what's going on here? In the documentary, they showed one girl who was 15, I think. She was 14 or 15. They took her across state lines to, I can't remember what state it was, but they took her across state lines to a motel with blacked out windows, and she married her first cousin, who was like 30-something years old. He was either in his like late 20s or early 30s.
Creep.
And she didn't want to. She was sobbing her eyes out, and Warren was just like, come on, you need to do this, you need to do this. And it was an arranged marriage. She obviously wanted it to happen, and I couldn't even imagine being put in that situation. Everything started to unfold, and people were kind of starting to catch on, but kind of not really starting to catch on. Like, some people were just kind of like, let them do their own thing, like they aren't bothering anybody. And then other people were like, if they're abusing children, like, we got to get to the bottom of this. And so Warren decided that he was going to make this ranch called Yearning for Zion. And it was a 1,700-acre FLDS community in El Dorado, Texas, with nearly 700 people. And in the community, it was, you got chosen to go there. You didn't get to go, you had to come and be told. And he mainly took young girls. I think you know
I
where this
almost said like the Dr. Phil ranch.
Oh god, we bring a bad baby into this? On August 10th, 2003, Warren declared that the blessings of the priesthood had been removed from the Short Creek community. He suspended all further religious meetings, but allowed his followers to continue to pay their offerings to him. So he just wanted their money. is basically what it was. They started sending him like $1,000 a week to build Zion. And he really started to focus on the lands of refuge. He wasn't really around the Short Creek community anymore. He was just really focused on building these. And they were all of these secret communities that, you know, not everybody knew about. The Zion Ranch had a temple, a waste treatment facility, a 29,000 square foot house for Warren, a meeting house, and several large log and concrete homes. So like they had a whole thing going on there, and it costed a lot of money. And then there was the April 2008 raid. On March 29th, 2008, a local domestic violence shelter hotline got a call from a female saying her name was Sarah. She said she was a 16-year-old victim of physical and sexual abuse at the YFZ Ranch. Investigators found out that the call was a hoax by tracing it. It ended up being Rosita Swinton, a much older woman who made the call, and she had a previous history of making hoax calls like this. But the call, that one call, triggered a mass-scale investigation at Zion. It was by the Texas law enforcement, and they were like,
is that outside?
yeah.
God, I hope so.
Child welfare officials got brought into it because there were so many children there. On April 3rd, the ranch was cordoned. The ranch was searched and they found evidence that made them believe the beds were in a part of the temple where males over the age of 17 engaged in sexual activity with underage girls. A religious scholar testified later in court saying the temple service lasts a couple of hours, so all the temples will have a place where someone can lie down if they need to. I don't believe that. CPS said there was a systematic process going on to groom these young girls to become brides, and revealed that several underage girls were forced into a spiritual marriage with much older men as soon as they reached puberty and were then made pregnant. So it's like the saying, old enough to bleed, old enough to breed, is pretty much what they were going by.
And the spiritual marriage is like because they can't legally be married to each other, so they call it a spiritual marriage.
And before Warren came into the picture, Rulon would only marry girls who were 18 and older, you know, like he really made sure about that. But then Warren came and he had this odd fantasy about little girls and just wanted them to be married. Judge Barbara Walther issued an order to remove all children 17 years and younger from the ranch.
Thank God.
A total of 462 children went into the temporary custody of Texas. 462.
That's a lot of children to figure out how to place, you know?
Yeah. Well, over 100 mothers left the ranch to be with these children. They allowed, I think it was 8 months and younger, the mothers could stay, but then all the other mothers had to go back. But they allowed weekly visits. You know, some of these moms had, you know, a lot of kids, and so they had to try to figure out who was who. People were lying about their age. There were some really young moms there, and they were trying to figure out, like, what do we do about all of this? And then on April 10th, the law enforcement completed their search and gave, like, the ranch back and then returned to the kids. During this time, all of these moms went on, like, national news and was like, they stole our kids from us, like, they have no right stealing our kids, like, we're not doing anything wrong. But they didn't know that what they were doing was wrong because they grew up thinking that this was normal. They didn't know the outside law. So, I mean, I don't blame them for, like, freaking out.
And it would be really hard to prove that your kids are your kids if they were born, you know, there and didn't have, like, a birth certificate, because I assume they were all home births. So
well, they had their own, like, hospitals in the community too, so it was completely gated off. That would be like a massive identity crisis. In July 2004, his nephew Brent Jeffs filed a lawsuit saying Warren anally raped him in the FLDS church's Salt Lake Valley compound in the late 1980s. Brent's brother Klain committed suicide after accusing Warren of sexually assaulting him as a child. So he's destroying his entire family at this point. In June 2005, Warren was charged in Mojave County, Arizona for sexual assault on a minor and conspiracy to commit sexual misconduct with a minor for arranging a 14-year-old girl and a 19-year-old male to get married. They were first cousins. In July 2005, the Arizona Attorney General's office sent out wanted posters offering $10,000 for information leading to Warren's arrest. On October 28th, Warren's brother Seth got arrested under suspicion of harboring a fugitive. Police found $142,000 of cash and $7,000 worth of prepaid debit cards and personal records. On May 1st, 2006, Seth was convicted of harboring a fugitive, and on July 14th, he was sentenced to 3 years probation and fined $2,500. So Seth was really like his transporter. He would be the one like transporting like all the money back and forth because Warren was on the run at this point. He was out doing things that we'll talk about in a minute, but Seth was, going to the Short Creek community, taking the donations because Warren was demanding that everybody put in $1,000 each week. He didn't care how you got it, but you had to do it. Warren had, millions of dollars. Just imagine like 8,000 members with $1,000 a week for months.
And that's a lot of money.
Yeah. On April 5th, 2006, Utah issued an arrest warrant for Warren on felony charges of accomplice rape of a teenage girl between 14 and 18 years old. In May 2006, he was placed on FBI's top 10 most wanted fugitives list for fleeing from the charges that he was arranging illegal marriages between the adult members and underage females. So he got arrested, and he was like, yeah, I'm not doing this, and just bailed. He was like, I'm done.
Bye.
On June 8th, 2006, he returned to Colorado City and performed more child bride marriages. So he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he just continued to do it. He was like, I don't care. On August 28th, 2006, he was pulled over on Interstate 15 in Clark County, Nevada, because the temporary license plates on the vehicle weren't visible. If you're driving a vehicle trying to avoid the police,
Stupid.
I feel like you would do everything in your power to not get pulled over. His favorite wife, Naomi Jessup, and his brother Isaac were with him. He had 4 computers, 16 cell phones, disguises, and more than $55,000 in cash. His wife and brother were questioned, then released. And while he was on the run, he went to Disneyland, he went to NFL games, he went to college games, he went to festivals like Mardi Gras, and someone quoted and said, he was living the life that he despised. He preaches all of this stuff, like all of this stuff is the devil's work.
Like, no trampolines, but I'm gonna go to Mardi Gras.
Yeah, like... On August 31st, 2006, in a Nevada court hearing, he waived extradition and agreed to return to Utah. While he had been in jail, he was still leading the FLDS by phone calls. So he got arrested, and they believed him that he was doing nothing wrong. They didn't know about the outside law, so they were like, why are they arresting him? He's not doing anything wrong. But he was. In 2007, Arizona charged him with 8 counts in 2 separate cases that included incest and sexual conduct with minors. In September, he was convicted of 2 counts of rape as an accomplice and sentenced to 10 years, but the conviction was overturned by the Utah Supreme Court in 2010 because of flawed jury instructions. Drat. In August 2011, he was extradited to Texas and was found guilty of sexual assault with a minor, raping a 15-year-old that he was married to, and aggravated sexual assault against a child, raping a 12-year-old he had married. Like, this man was in his 60s marrying a 12-year-old. How?
So as we established, he's a creep.
My brain cells just don't want to understand that information. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 20 years and fined $10,000. He's eligible for parole on July 22nd, 2038. He is still said to lead the FLDS, although quite a few members left after all that happened. So I'm glad some of them woke up and was like, this ain't right, I'm out.
On November 10th, 2009, Raymond Jessup was sentenced to 10 years in prison and fined $8,000 for sexually assaulting a 16-year-old girl around November 19th, 2004. On December 18th, 2009, Alan Keat was sentenced to 33 years in prison. On January 22nd, 2010, Michael George Emick pleaded no contest to sexual assault charges and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. He married a 16-year-old girl at Zion on August 5th, 2004, and she gave birth to a son yet less than a year later.
That is awful.
On April 14th, 2010, Emick pleaded no contest on a bigamy charge and got a 7-year sentence that runs concurrently with his other sentences. On March 19th, 2010, Merrill Leroy Jessup was sentenced to 75 years in prison for one count of sexual assault of a child, convicted of marrying and fathering a child with a 15-year-old girl. On April 15th, 2010, Lehigh Barlow Jeffs pleaded no contest to bigamy and sexual assault of a child and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. On June 22nd, 2010, Abram Harker Jeffs was found guilty of sexual assault of a child.
And that was the end of that. I mean, who knows what they're doing today, honestly, because he still leads them. I don't know if they're still doing what they're doing, but I don't see how, you know, they could be stopped. Well, I mean, I see how they could be stopped, but like, unless the police are constantly going and, you know, surveilling them, they're not gonna know. So honestly, who knows? Maybe it like returned to the way it was before Warren, and they're living the way that they're supposed to be. That's what I hope for, at least, because, you know, those people didn't deserve to go through that. Okay, so like and comment and subscribe if you liked this, and I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who has subscribed, because yesterday we hit 1,101 subscribers.
Put
the thumbs away. Big heart.
I can't.
Middle fingers down. There you go. It means so much to me that you guys take time out of your day to support me and listen to me and her now. We're kind of dumb, but we're also kind of funny, so, and I hope.
Mostly dumb.
Yeah, we share a brain cell. How was your day with it?
Ding.
You're not using it.
No, I'm not. It's taking a nap, I guess.
You're letting it go to waste. So yeah, we'll see you in the next video that we're literally going to film right now.
But you will know, because I'll put my hood up and I'll be a different person.
Okay, Thuggerella. Oh god, you look like the sweatshirt kid with the ears. Okay, we're done. Goodbye.